long story short, I survived the tumor, but neither my professional dreams nor my marriage did. In the process of trying to figure out how I can get better, I decided to run. The doctor told me, you have to accept your reality, and your reality is that you probably won't walk straight anymore. Resilience as something that we already have within, and all we need to do is to unlock it and utilize it.
I often refer to these things as crucibles, right? Like, so for me, it's important to always have something in my life that is hard. It helps me maintain a level of pressure. Louise, welcome to the UltraGrowth podcast. I am so glad that we're finally here.
RJ, thank you so much for having me. I feel humble and honored to be here with you. Thank you.
Yeah, look, I first came across you on Dory's her book, The Long Game, which was just right up, I guess, your alley, talking about how the grind and the focus and focusing on all things long term. And I came across yourself. She talked about your endurance running, your ultra running, your academic achievements, what you do. And obviously, I as you know, I reached out to you some time ago. The time wasn't right, but I'm so glad that we are here now to talk about resilience. And I notice it, here I'm looking at your screen. It says resilient human. What is that? Like, what do you, what's a resilient human to you, Louise?
Wow. I was doing another interview with somebody else, and then, what do you want to be known for? I am a resilient human. And I think that, the book, I recently brought a book that is called Ordinary Resilience. And I think that the way I describe it is that resilience is ordinary and is part of our human DNA. We are here because we have made incredible adaptations through time. And you and I know that running is one of those adaptations that got us here. Running didn't happen overnight. It happened over a long period of time. The book is trying to depict resilience as something that we already have within. And all we need to do is to unlock it and utilize it. You probably noticed that, like when people easily confuse pain with discomfort. It's, I don't want to run because it's so painful. Or I don't want to do this because it's so painful. And it's not painful, it's just discomfort. And I think that, having that difference, it realizes that if we think that it is just discomfort, we will be able to push ourselves even more.
Let's touch on your personal story because it's different, it's harrowing, and it's wild. Like, give myself and the audience a flavor as to how you met resilience. Like, where did your journey with it start?
So I grew up in Guatemala, Central America, in the 70s and 80s. And if you remember at that time, the United States was locked in what is called the Cold War. The battles of the Cold War happened in Latin America. The area where I grew up was heavily an area where there was a lot of unrest, political unrest. From one side we had the government supported by the United States, and on the other side we had the guerrillas supported by Cuba and Russia, and they were they were fighting all the time. I also grew really poor. My family didn't have much, and in fact, at that time my dad was a truck driver, and he will make, I think that his salary was about $35 a month, and my mom's day wages was $1.25 a day. It wasn't much, so it was hard. But having said that, I remember, I had a really happy childhood, and I think that the reason why is because I thought, and my dad, was responsible for that is normal for us. That this is the way we live, and we need to accept it, and we need to embrace it and move forward. So that's how I grew up. I moved to the United States and on a scholarship, and I went to Florida. Actually, first to California, then Florida, where I got an engineering degree on the plant sciences, because my goal was to become a farmer. I wanted to be a farmer. In the process, I fell in love with science. So I got a master's degree in plant biotechnology, and then I moved to Michigan, where I did a PhD in molecular biology and biochemistry. In the process, I met a woman, I got married and everything else. I got appointed as a professor over at Michigan State University. So I was like, okay, it's done. I am done now. But, life is very interesting. We have curveballs. And my curveball came in the form of a brain tumor. So long story short, I survived the tumor, but neither my professional dreams nor my marriage did. That was hard for me, and then in the process of trying to figure out how I can get better, I started to run. And the doctor told me, you have to accept your reality. And your reality is that you probably you won't walk straight anymore or teach for I don't know when, because I had some cognition issues. That didn't stop me. So that was over 100 marathons ago. So I have run 100 marathons. I've done several Ironman triathlons. I've done lots of endurance swims. My longest swim is 5 miles. And I've done, Western States 100. And what you told me right now is the reaction that people have of me when they hear about my story. Oh my God, you're so resilient. You're this, how do you do it? And I was thinking, actually going back to Guatemala for a little bit, my dad had a horrible accident when I was a little kid. And then when he was in his bed, and he started saying, I am going, when I get better, I'm going to build a business. I'm going to buy your house. I'm going to send you to university. And my mom and I were thinking, you were not able to do this when you were healthy. How are you going to do it now? But guess what? He did it. He did it. He became very successful. He has incredible businesses now, and he's compared to where we grew up, it's amazing. So I had that level of example when I was going through my own thing. And then when people will tell me that, that you're this, you're that, I realize I'm not doing anything different. I am not doing anything extraordinary. This is the way I live. This is the way I am. So the book started as a journal, reflection of what is it that my dad and I have done differently that allow us to be successful after horrible things that happened to us. So at that time, I didn't even cross the name resilience to me. I just knew that somehow my dad and I were able to survive and then adapt and then thrive. And it wasn't until I read the book Option B by Adam Grant that the concept of resilience came into being. And then I realized, oh, this is what is happening to me. This is it. So it wasn't like I was trying to figure out what it was and see if I fit on it. I just finally had a name to put into what was happening to me and my dad.
We're going to unpack that. And I think that's really fascinating, Luis. I think it is interesting. Like I talked to Joe DeSena once, the founder of Spartan, and he was telling me these weird and wonderful places they go and do races, the people that have set up the courses in some of these countries, like the indigenous people, will cut through miles and miles of bush with machete to get the courses ready for them to run. And for them, that is harder than the actual event, probably, like the preparation of the course. They wouldn't look at that as an achievement. Like for them, that's just life. And it's something to be said about, particularly for those of us in Western society in what we call, I guess, first world, this whole piece around manufactured adversity and trying to seek things that are hard. Whereas for people like yourself growing up and your dad, there was no word. It's just a way of life. So talking about your dad, what do you think when you reflect on what shifted for him? What was that? Just is a bystander watching him, when you reflect on it post hoc, what shifted for him?
I think that what shifted for him, and I can also see when I made that shift myself, is when I committed to get better. This is how it happened to me. I was at the bottom of of the issues that I was facing. I was so disappointed and sad and defeated that I almost thinking I thought of suicide. I said, I'm gonna end it all here. There's nothing there for me. And as I was in the middle of thinking how I was gonna do it, an image of my mother appeared in my head. And then I realized I cannot do this to her. I cannot do this to her because if I do it, she will gonna suffer tremendously. So I said, I need to get better. I need to get better. And I think that that moment was pivotal for me. And talking to my dad, I think that he also made the declaration, I'm going to send you to university. I'm going to build my business. So it just is that desire of doing something else to get you where you are and make it a commitment is what for me and my dad was the pivotal moment of the transformation.
When you made that decision, or like a lot of people, they come to that place, but they never, or they can't make that decision for whatever reason. They don't have that gift of what we call gift of desperation in my community of, the opportunity to see where you're at and then obtain the energy to move forward. Did spirituality or any belief in something greater than yourself, like, did that come into play? Like, you access that energy to move forward, or was it just pure blunt force? Like, I'm just going to get this shit done.
Whether we like it or not, we are inspired by something bigger than ourselves. We need to accept it. I think that spirituality for me comes in the form of a really deep reflection of the things that I do and the impact that I can have on others and the impact that others have on me. And I realize that we are all interconnected. And what I do is going back to having meaning. And for me, having meaning is the idea that we are significant to somebody, even to ourselves. And the other component of having meaning is to have a purpose. What am I? People that are, in dark places is because they feel that they have a purpose. You see what I'm saying? So I think that we need to latch ourselves to something bigger than ourselves to have that purpose. And the last component, I think, of meaning is coherence. And the coherence is the idea that, hey, this is where I am. As opposed to, oh, when I get that, I wish I didn't have that. I wish I didn't have this. The coherence is the idea that, hey, listen, this is the moment of a decision making for me. This is where I am, and I am going to move forward, period. So the spirituality for me comes in the form of making that decision. And I think that the biggest gift that God life has given us is the power of choice. What I did is to exercise that power to the best of my ability.
We're going to shift the lens to the topic of ordinary resilience as you framed it. And so what are some of the core principles?
So as I was trying to understand, what my dad and I were, did different. I met a very interesting individual. He's an author. And then he said, you need to write a book. And I'm like, well, what am I going to write about? What am I going to write about? I said, I have stories, but those are stories and they're probably going to help anyone. And he said to me, you just write your stories. You just write your stories. So I did. And after a while, I have compiled a bunch of them. And then, he said, let's categorize them. And he was very helpful. And then we categorize those stories. And he will say, what is this about? Tell me about this. Tell me about this. And what happened is that 5 piles became very evident. And he said, that's your book. At that time, I didn't know what resilience was. He said, that's your book. And then I realized that that's the way I've been living my life. And that's the way my dad has been living his. And I realized that those 5 pillars are accessible to everyone. So number 1 is embrace the suck. Embrace the challenge. Understanding that it is where we are, and that's all we have. You and I have done this ultras, and you realize that you're in the middle of mile 75 of a 100-mile race. You think that you cannot go any longer, and the only way to get out there is to keep going because this is the only way to get out there is to get to the next aid station. So I think that is key, is to understanding where we are, and we can just move forward. So embrace the suck.
Just with that, what's the core principle in your view behind embrace the suck? Like, what's the enabler?
I think that for me, embrace the suck is to realize that self-acceptance and radical acceptance. And I like myself. Let me tell you. When I came to that conclusion is when I when I was going through my whole thing, I realized that I was comparing myself to the person that I was. You know, I was a professor, I had a wife, I had a house, you know, and that was, it was very hard for me to accept that that person didn't exist anymore. So I was putting a lot of weight on my self-worth based on that comparison. When I finally realized that this is the new me now, tumor included, is when when I started shifting the situations and allow me to get some more self-compassion and realize that, this is what I have. And by the way, we already have everything that we need to take the first step. So embrace the suck is number one. The second one is, if you think about all the things that, that looking at my life, there are so many times of fear, including, running my first Ironman was one of the most scary moments of my life. And I have a motto for that. And the motto was always, I don't need to be fearless. I just need to fear less. So the idea that whatever scares me, if I just go and start chipping away of it, sooner or later, I will be less scared of that. And I think that this is a very important moment here. A lot of times, people say, you need to get out of your comfort zone. Getting out of your comfort zone is scary. And getting out of your comfort zone, at least for me, is something that I'm not comfortable doing. What I can do is I can expand my comfort zone. And going back to resilience, I think that what we think about resilience, this is a long game. This is a long game. It's not something that you're going to do right away and then all of a sudden you're going to be resilient. This is something that happens over many, many, many years, and we need to be intentional about doing it.
What I'm hearing you say is action is really key. Just leaning in, slowly narrowing your vision. What's the next right thing, right? What do I got to do?
Totally. I think that the one thing that I realized is that we also have to have big goals, but not focus on the big goal, but the next step to get to that goal. And the next step is sometimes it's just as simple as making a decision to do it. So principle number 3 is relationships. I can think of all the pivotal moments of my life where I've been pushed, I've been challenged, people have given me an opportunity. And every single pivotal moment of my life, I can go back and realize that it was catalyzed for one individual, whether it is my wife, my ex-wife, my professor, or whatnot. And I think that we spend a lot of time solving problems when we should be mimicking solutions. And the key for that is to realize that whatever we're going through, somebody else has already gone and solved it for us. All we need to do is reach out and ask for help. So that's number 3. Number 4 is find your inner strength. And the idea that, we're stronger than we think we are. Going back to when we talked at the beginning is, we're recognizing the difference between discomfort and pain. When I go running, I feel like I'm going to say, am I uncomfortable or am I in pain? And I say, oh, I am uncomfortable, then I can keep going.
How did running help you expand your insights in regards to your capacity to handle discomfort or realize that discomfort isn't pain? Like, do we have to be purposeful in terms of increasing that capacity? Meaning from what I understand of your story, it seems like your running propelled your transformation and helped you gain more insights and strength that you applied into your life.
Yes, but those things were an outcome because of the running. So there is a fantastic book, The Power of Habit. Have you heard of it? In that Power of Habit, there is a chapter about keystone habits. And the keystone habit is doing the one thing that will influence everything. And the story goes, that this particular individual went to turn around a company, and people had incredible expectations of him. He's gonna change the market. He's gonna change this. He's gonna make decisions about X, Y, and Z. And he said, no, we're going to focus on employee safety. That's what we're going to do. And everybody went berserk. How is it possible? We need other things. No, we're going to focus on employee safety. And what happened is that the minute everybody started focusing on employee safety, things started to change. People were more satisfied. The product was better. They were looking for better quality control issues. Everything from the lens of employee safety. The same happened to me. When I made the decision to get better, when I told you that I was, in there, thinking about killing myself, and an image of my mother appeared, I made a decision. I said, I'm gonna get better. I'm gonna get better. And to me, at that moment, getting better was to get my health back. So I started running, and running became the vehicle for getting my health back. But as a result of running, magical things happen. Magical things happen. I met business partners, I met mentors, I even met my wife, the person that is my wife now, running. So I think that a lot of times we focus on trying to do everything. What we need to do is to focus on one keystone habit. What is the one thing that we can do that will influence everything?
The catalyst for change.
Absolutely.
I often refer to these things as crucibles, right? Like, so for me, it's important to always have something in my life that is hard, because I feel like it helps me maintain a level of pressure that moves me towards excellence. Really.
Yes. Yeah. And so here is another element that I want to bring back to the title, Ordinary Resilience. And I think that a lot of times we think that we need to do something hard and difficult in order to acquire resilience. And that is not the truth. We can do simple things, like, but the key here is being intentional about doing those. Like, hey, I'm stuck in traffic. Okay, so what decision I need to make? I'm gonna enjoy this. I'm gonna put a podcast. I'm gonna listen to RJ in his podcast or something along those lines. Something that will actually build us up. One thing that I do with my kids, I have a son that is 5 and 6 years old now. We still shower together, and at the end of his shower, I call them, okay, time to agua fria. Agua fria in Spanish means cold water. Agua fria, and he goes, yes, I'm ready, So we turn the water to water fria. So he used to get a shock. And I think that those little elements prepare us for when the thing big happens. So here is something that really was why I do this. In 2013, I just ran Western States 100. Actually, I ran Western States 100 in 2012. And at the end, in October of 2012, I went to see my neurosurgeon again. And I went in there, and this is the first time that I was meeting this neurosurgeon, because the previous one retired, and this is person that I was getting. And he come in and he said, oh, what is the patient? And he said, I am the patient. And I said, that's not possible. For the films that I saw, I was expecting to see someone some major neurological issues. You don't have any. What have you been doing? And I was like, I've been running. That was my answer. I've been running. And he said, my God, you keep doing what you're doing because it's been working for you. But having said that, you have a ticking bomb in your head and we need to have a surgery. So going back to resilience and what ordinary it is, if we put an emphasis on something that will make us stronger, and we made decisions about something, for me was running, that completely helped me to my body adapted to the fact that I had a tumor that was growing, and the doctor didn't realize that they were expecting to see someone else with, neurological issues.
Do you actually ran the event with the tumor still?
Oh yeah, I still have it. They cannot get it out. The only thing that they can do is shave it and reduce the size. And the location of the tumor is in a place where, if you put a pencil from here to here and a pencil from here to here, right when they meet, that's where the location is. And it is embedded in the brain tissue that they cannot remove it without damaging the brain. So the only thing that they can do is reduce the size.
And has that process, like, did it impact you cognitively?
It did when I went at the beginning, but it wasn't the tumor, but it was the operation. It was the surgery that, I mean, I completely lost the ability to, short-term memory. And even now, I mean, if you tell me your number, I probably remember the last digit. So I had to write, I had to write. What was very interesting, because as a result of that, I became a writer. Thus, I wrote a book, and I actually am writing for HBR now. So going back to that, what I'm saying is that sometimes we feel that, that we got the short end of the stick. And the key here is, what can we do to take advantage of what we have, including something that is not in our control, including something that is not, that could be considered bad from the side of the other people.
I think one of the key features of resilience, and I definitely, like you just touched on it, and it's something I've had multiple conversations about, is the ability to connect the dots and kind of follow the bouncing ball. Understanding and accepting your situation as it is. I mean, that's remarkable. Like, so your impact cognitively actually led you to become an author. That's wild, right? Because you just did what you need, the next right thing, right? Okay, well, I can't remember things I need to write. Oh, okay, well, this writing thing's not that bad. And away you went, right?
That's right, yeah. So the way I tell people is, like, what is the one thing that you can do today so that crisis that you're having right now, 2 years from now, you can say that is the best thing that ever happened to you? Because that allows us to see things from a different perspective. That allows us to see things, what is the right side of the situation that we're in.
I talk to people about creating leverage. If you're skillful, you can create leverage out of things, whether they're good, bad, ugly, indifferent, right? And I think that's what you're talking about, is like, what's the lesson here, and what can I pull out of it to move myself forward? Sorry, I digress. So back to the steps. So we're talking about the core principles of ordinary resilience. And I think the last one is solve for fulfillment.
Yep, that's what it is, solve for fulfillment. And the idea is that, everything that we do is in purpose of something bigger than us, because that allows us to keep moving. I mean, a lot of times we think that the world revolves around us, and it isn't. It doesn't. And so we need to figure out a way to see what is the contribution to the world, and how we can do more of that. And that is the pillar that allow us to to go through the other four easier. I have a formula for that, and it's called, they call resilience for me is commitment. We talk about commitment already, plus persistence. And the way I describe persistence is that realize that life is not easy. Life is hard, But if we are actually committed, we're going to find a way of actually doing the things that are hard. Now, if you only do things, that is a recipe for burnout. If you are committed and persistent, you are in the way to burnout. So the way I think that is key here is to be optimistic. And I have the formula as times optimistic, because if you have zero optimism, there is zero resilience. And what it does is the optimism allows us to see beyond our current situation, and realizing that the way we're living right now is not the end of our story, that there are much, much bigger things ahead of us.
I think without optimism too, people become cynical, right? Like, life happens to them. Optimism is that ability to reframe things in your darkest hours, or when things aren't necessarily going your way, and creating meaning out of things. I think that's all part of it. Like, how do we interpret situations that move us forward? Yeah.
If I could describe the book in one sentence, which is the way I live now, and which is the way I coach, my philosophy of coaching is the following. To act differently, we need to think differently. And to think differently, we need to see differently. And that is the entire premise of the book, is challenging the way we see things. Because the minute we see things from a different perspective, we think about it differently, and then all of a sudden we're not act differently. I'm gonna give you a recent example, my life, when my second child was born, actually when my first child was born, I hated changing diapers. I don't want to change diapers. It's stinky, it's messy, it's horrible, And then one day, and my wife and I will get into fights about who's going to change the diaper. And then one day I realized that there are many parents that wish they could do this. Many fathers that we wish could do this. And I think of my dad, that he wanted, I grew up close to him, but he was on the road all the time. And I'm sure that he would have loved to change one diaper. So I reframed for myself, and I said, this is a privilege that I'm changing the diaper, because there are many, many fathers that cannot do that. And then all of a sudden, I was like fighting for my wife because I want to change that diaper. So it's a reframing component, if you think about, a lot of times I see, there is nothing to eat. You open the refrigerator, it's full of food. Yes, there are other people that don't have food. So I think that there is a level of gratitude and privilege that we don't take into account. And I think that reframing our situations from that perspective allow us to realize that we don't have it as bad. Therefore, we can actually live through it.
Yeah, there's a lot of wisdom in that, Luis. As a CEO, when I'm looking at potential or human capability in the form of staff or potential hires, I tend to try to understand how people see the world, not really focus on their skills per se, because for me, the way they interpret the world, their narrative, and getting insight on that tells me their capability and what their true potential really is. And the interesting thing about that is, whether I'm biased towards it or not, one of the things that I love to see with people, and particularly the staff, are people that they're fighting their battles, they're fighting their demons, they're showing up and they're trying to be better, versus kind of floating around and, they're having the big conversations and they're trying to look at their stuff and they're trying to deal with it. And for me, I'm inspired by that. But these are the people that I love to invest time in, because I know they're trying to shift themselves towards the better. And my history tells me that these are the people that you want on the bus. And I know that you can't have, not everything needs to be that deep and meaningful all the time. I tend to index towards it. But I do feel like, for me, particularly when unleashing human resources and capital, the competitive advantage is when you have people that are deeply realized and deeply purposeful.
The world doesn't belong to the people that know the most, but the people that learn the fastest. And those people that are actually vested on their own development, those are learners. Those are people that are learners. And in organizations, right now the world is moving so fast. Technology is moving so fast that we're always beginners, always learning. That the iPhone released a new version, we have to relearn it. And I think that what I've seen, in terms of potential, of employees, is people that think that they have the experience and they want to run with experience, as opposed to people that have learned, but they're looking to solve problems with what they have learned. So I think that you're doing the right thing, selecting individuals that are learners, that are looking for improvement, and they're open to, to move forward, and then better themselves. And to tell you the truth, the way I talk to people is that don't think about the company, think about yourself. Your output is going to be incredibly more useful if you improve yourself, but do it for yourself. And the incredible outcome is that the organization benefits in its way as well. So use what you have, the organization, to learn something for yourself. But the minute you do it, your output and your impact is going to be far, far greater than what it is now.
Yeah. It's really interesting, because there's been a string of single moms right? That are like in the company that I'm currently with, and they're single moms, and they're kind of stepping into senior leadership roles. I'm witnessing their narrative and like their why. You know, they're raising kids on their own. They're not doing it, and it's just extraordinary to be part of that, and to see their aha moments, and to see their struggle and their insecurities and resilience that they're grabbing towards. And that's, yeah, it's just remarkable. And it just, you know, I think it really ties in with the discussion that we're having. Because I know that your experience is broad. Like, can organizations help with resilience?
Absolutely. And I think, you know, somebody asked me that same question. And I think that organizations are not resilient. Individuals are resilient. An organization is resilient as the compound resilience of the people that work in the organization. But having said that, you know, I think that as a CEO, as a team leader, you know, the best way you can do to increase the resilience of your team is, number one, is model the way. Number two is the idea that encourage experimentation and mistakes and failures. You know, because that's what resilience is all about, is adapting and trying to figure out a better way of doing things. To your question, can organizations, you know, work on resilience? Absolutely. Resilience comes from the compound effect of the individuals within that organization. And I gotta say, you know, I mean, talking about employee engagement, you know, the biggest driver of employee engagement is the relationship that employees have with their managers. And if the manager cares for them and challenges them, you know, they're going to step up. So I think that managers have the ability to increase, you know, the level of resilience that people have by modeling the way and raising the bar for them.
Shifting the conversation to children, a lot of our audience, and, you know, I've got a 7-year-old, a 4-year-old. I'm interested to know, like, your upbringing was different, right? Immigrant's tale, immigrant's journey. And do you struggle, or are you pretty okay with, like, your kids? And I think kids are growing up in a world that has increasingly more stuff on offer and abundance and comfort. How do you deal with that? And I'm just making some assumptions here. Kind of, you know, you've come from a different kind of upbringing, and now you're raising kids in a different world. Is that a struggle for you sometimes, Luis? Like, how do you reconcile the two, mate?
And I mean, it was a struggle. And the realization that, you know, when I grew up, you know, we didn't have a gift at all. You know, I think that the only gift that I will get is in Christmas or my birthday, and it was a made up gift, you know, and that was it. And my kids swim in gifts now, you know. So for a while I was struggling, how I do this, you know, they need to realize that that's not the way they grew up. So there were a few things that not the way I grew up, and they need to learn to do X. They need to experience that. But then I realized that the world is changing, you know, and they live in a world that is different from the where I grew up. So rather than try to recreate a world for them, is how I adapt myself in the world that they're in. A couple of things that I've done for my kids, you know, I mean, you know, when they were, and they still do, you know, when they're younger, instead of telling them stories about princesses and heroes, I will tell them stories about my family. You know, oh, you know, this is what happened with, you know, my dad. My dad grew up here, and it has been incredibly rewarding to see the connections that they have made with my family. So it's not only, it has two things, you know, they realize that the way they're growing up is not the way I grew up, but also they are emotionally attached to my family as well. And that means a lot to me. So that's one. The other thing that I've been doing is we have a little ritual every day, you know, and every day when we go to school, you know, we have a pet rock, like a little rock that is painted. And that is, we call it a gratitude rock. So when we start driving, you know, I get the rock and I say, you know, 3 things that I'm grateful for. And then I pass it to my other kid. So then I ask them, so what kind of family are we? And they say, we are the grateful family. And then I asked them, what kind of kids are we? And they answer, and now it's been for years, and they know this by memory. And they say, we're kind, confident, resilient, and strong. Strong, kind, confident, and resilient. So what I'm trying to do is to give them an identity. You see what I'm saying? An identity that they're living in this particular world with all the gifts and all the, the pressures. And here is something that I really appreciate, that over time I can see the impact of that little ritual that we have. A couple of weeks ago, we went to Tahoe, and there is a place where they actually have like zip lines, stairs, like hanging bridges, and they put the kids on a harness and they have to drive. I put my kid in there, and then he started to cry. He didn't want to do it. And then all of a sudden, RJ, he got up and he said, facing my fears and do it anyway. And he started doing that. And I'm like, oh my God.
It's working.
So, yes. And it's actually working, the identity. So like, for instance, like when they fight or when they do things, I don't tell them, don't do that. But rather I ask them a question. Is that a kind thing to do? Is that a resilient thing to do? By asking that question, then, oh, no. So I think that I hope that what I'm doing is giving them an identity that will turn into two adults that are kind, confident, and resilient.
Mate, yeah, I'm with you. I mean, you're better than me, Luis. I still do ethnic dad and yell, but I'm when all else fails, I scream. But I mean, the thing is I'm with you. And I think like to see particularly those moments that you realize that the hard work's paying off in the form of how they see themselves and also like how they conduct themselves when I'm not there. I think a lot of the times they'll act out and they may not do the ideal thing with me, but they know what it is. And when I'm not there, I hear stories. They meet the expectations. And
when I picked them from school, every night, every day, I asked them a question. Who did you help today? The other day, we had a conversation with the teacher, my 5-year-old, that the parent-teacher conference. And she was telling me that Nathan is very helpful. He's very helpful. The other day, there was some water, and he went and grabbed, the paper towels, and they cleaned it up, and he threw it without nobody asked him anything. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so happy. But what I realized that was happening is because he wanted to have something to tell me at the end of the day. When I asked the question, who did you help today? The incredible rewarding component of that is actually looking for opportunities to help people. And that to me, man, it's so fulfilling.
I tell my wife I want kids that take responsibility for their environment. We all want things that we can impart on our kids. Like, I just want them to contribute and take responsibility. And maybe that's a bit heavy, like, bearing the weight of the world on their shoulders. But I feel like we need to create kids that are going to do that. Like, feel responsible for change and change makers, and to be the ones that step forward and do maybe the unexpected thing. And yeah, I think that's great. But, no, that's great advice and insight. So we're going to start to land this plane, Luis. I really appreciate you, man. I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing more about ordinary resilience. Where can our audience learn more about the book, find more information about you? We will put everything in the show notes, but yeah, it'd be great if you could just give us that info.
So the book, you can order the book on Amazon.com or Barnes & Noble or whatever you order your books online. There is available pretty much everywhere. Please, have my LinkedIn link over. People can connect to me, and I answer to every single email. If emailed, I'll answer. And my business website is velascoaching.com, and I hope that you can put a link to that as well.
Well, Luis, thank you so much. I know it's the start of my day. I think it's the end of your day. It's about, I guess, children's time. Yeah, children's time. And all the best, mate. And we will talk soon.
Thank you, RJ. I appreciate it.